The world has spent the last decade obsessing over energy transitions. Electric vehicles, green hydrogen, solar corridors across North Africa, offshore wind farms in the North Sea. The assumption, quietly embedded in policy circles from Brussels to Washington, was that the age of transformative oil discoveries was fading. That the next geopolitical shock would come from lithium brine, not crude. And then, off the quiet Atlantic coastline of Namibia, beneath waters long considered promising but uncertain, drill bits struck something that forced energy strategists to pause. The Orange Basin. Early estimates from exploration campaigns led by Shell and TotalEnergies suggest that recoverable resources in the basin could reach into the billions of barrels, where figures often cited hover around 10 billion barrels across multiple discoveries, numbers large enough to reposition a country of just over 2.5 million people into the upper tier of global hydrocarbon holders. For decades, Namibia's economy has been known for diamonds, uranium, and fisheries. Its political reputation has been one of relative stability in a region often marked by turbulence. It was not considered the next oil superpower. Now analysts are asking a question that would have sounded improbable only a few years ago. Could Namibia, if development proceeds at scale, accumulate sovereign wealth rivaling that of hydrocarbon giants like Qatar? The comparison is provocative. It is also incomplete, because oil alone does not create prosperity. Governance does, timing does, structure does, and in the case of Namibia, the story unfolding is less about sudden riches and more about whether a carefully governed state can navigate one of the most dangerous transitions in political economy: the shift from diversified resource dependence to petroleum power. The world wasn't watching Namibia's coastline closely, until suddenly it had to. To understand the magnitude of what is at stake, it helps to rewind. Namibia's economic architecture was shaped by colonial extraction. Under German rule in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, followed by South African administration, infrastructure was built primarily to extract minerals. Railways connected inland mines to the port of Walvis Bay. Diamond operations along the southern coast operated under strict state company partnerships. The economic logic was outward-facing: move commodities to global markets. When Namibia achieved independence in 1990, under the leadership of Sam Nujoma and the ruling SWAPO movement, the state inherited a resource-oriented economy but also relatively functional institutions. Unlike several post-colonial states that descended into prolonged instability, Namibia cultivated a reputation for constitutional continuity and measured policymaking. Mining remained central. Diamonds, managed through partnerships involving De Beers, generated substantial revenue. Uranium exports positioned Namibia as a significant supplier to global nuclear markets. Fisheries and agriculture added diversification, while tourism capitalized on the stark beauty of the Namib Desert. Yet structural vulnerabilities persisted. The economy was small and open. It depended heavily on commodity cycles. Youth unemployment remained high. Income inequality, rooted in apartheid-era dispossession, lingered stubbornly. Oil exploration along Namibia's coast was not new. Geological surveys had hinted at potential for decades, but repeated drilling campaigns produced limited commercial success. Investors grew cautious. Capital moved elsewhere. Then, beginning in 2022, exploration wells in the Orange Basin began delivering results that were difficult to ignore. The basin itself stretches along the maritime border between Namibia and South Africa, part of a geological formation that mirrors productive basins across the South Atlantic, including Brazil's pre-salt fields. Advances in deepwater drilling technology made previously inaccessible reserves more viable. As companies returned with improved seismic imaging and capital discipline, discoveries followed. Announcements from Shell's Graph 1 well and TotalEnergies' Venus discovery signaled that Namibia's offshore geology might be far more promising than earlier campaigns suggested. It was not just a single well, it was a pattern. Patterns change narratives. The structural shift facing Namibia is profound. Before oil, the country's fiscal space was tied closely to mining royalties, customs revenues from the Southern African Customs Union, and modest domestic taxation. Economic growth fluctuated with diamond output and global commodity prices. Public investment decisions were cautious, constrained by revenue volatility. Large-scale oil production, if developed, could alter the revenue base dramatically. Even conservative production scenarios imply export volumes that would dwarf current hydrocarbon output, which is minimal. Government take from production sharing agreements, royalties, and corporate taxation could expand fiscal capacity over decades. That prospect explains why management of the emerging petroleum sector has been elevated to the highest political levels, reportedly coordinated under the presidency to centralize oversight and strategic planning. Centralization can serve two purposes. It can ensure coherence and discipline, or it can concentrate power in ways that invite risk. Namibia's authorities have repeatedly emphasized caution. Officials speak openly about the resource curse, the pattern observed in several oil-rich states where sudden revenue inflows distort institutions, inflate currencies, and entrench elite capture. The country has begun discussing frameworks for a sovereign wealth fund designed to channel oil revenues into long-term savings and stabilization mechanisms. The intention, at least in principle, is to smooth volatility and invest for future generations rather than consume windfalls immediately. Such frameworks are not theoretical. They are responses to observed history. Across the continent, oil has delivered both prosperity and distortion. Nigeria's decades of petroleum wealth did not automatically translate into broad-based development. Angola experienced oil-driven growth, but governance challenges and debt accumulation complicated outcomes. On the other hand, smaller producers like Ghana have attempted to institutionalize revenue management rules early, with mixed but instructive results. Namibia enters this phase with one advantage. Production has not yet begun at scale. There is time to design institutions before the largest flows arrive. Time, however, is rarely abundant in politics. Oil development is capital-intensive. Offshore deepwater projects require billions in upfront investment. Production platforms, subsea infrastructure, export terminals, each demands technical expertise and financing. Foreign direct investment will therefore be central. Major international energy companies possess the balance sheets and operational capacity required for complex offshore fields. Their presence inevitably ties Namibia more closely to global capital markets and geopolitical alignments. China, the United States, and European states all have strategic interests in secure energy supplies. Even in a decarbonizing world, the war in Ukraine underscored Europe's vulnerability to concentrated energy dependencies. Diversification has become strategic doctrine. Southern Africa, with relatively stable Atlantic shipping routes and distance from Middle Eastern choke points, offers attractive alternatives. Namibian crude, if developed, would likely find markets in Europe and potentially Asia, altering Atlantic energy flows. This shift extends beyond crude exports. Namibia has also positioned itself as a potential green hydrogen hub, leveraging abundant solar and wind resources. The paradox is striking. A country could simultaneously expand hydrocarbon production and invest heavily in renewable exports. Some view this as contradiction. Others see pragmatic sequencing. Hydrocarbon revenues can finance renewable infrastructure. The key lies in avoiding path dependency that locks the economy into single resource reliance. Walvis Bay, Namibia's principal port, could transform into a multi-energy logistics hub, handling crude exports, hydrogen derivatives, and mineral shipments. Infrastructure corridors linking offshore production to onshore facilities would stimulate domestic engineering capacity. Economic transformation, however, is not automatic. It depends on linkages. If oil operations remain enclave industries, capital-intensive, foreign-managed, importing most inputs, the domestic multiplier remains limited. If local content policies are calibrated effectively, training programs expand, and supply chains integrate local firms, the impact broadens. Balancing investor attractiveness with domestic participation is delicate. Excessive regulatory burdens deter investment. Excessive liberalization reduces local benefit. Institutional maturity becomes decisive. Risk, meanwhile, accumulates quietly. Oil revenues can strengthen currencies. A stronger currency can erode competitiveness in non-oil sectors, a phenomenon known as Dutch disease. For Namibia, whose mining and fisheries exports depend on cost competitiveness, currency appreciation could introduce strain. Public expectations are rising. Citizens envision improved healthcare facilities, expanded education access, upgraded roads, and urban development. Expectations are rational. Oil discoveries generate psychological wealth before financial wealth materializes. If production timelines stretch longer than anticipated, as offshore projects often do, political patience may thin. Managing expectations becomes governance strategy. Debt dynamics also matter. Governments sometimes borrow against anticipated future oil revenues to finance current spending. If production is delayed or prices fall, repayment pressures mount. Environmental considerations add complexity. Offshore drilling in ecologically sensitive waters carries reputational and ecological risk. Namibia's coastline supports rich marine biodiversity and a fishing industry vital to livelihoods. International environmental standards, impact assessments, and transparent oversight will shape both domestic legitimacy and investor confidence. Energy transition politics cannot be ignored. Global climate commitments are intensifying. Our financial institutions face pressure to reduce fossil fuel exposure. Namibia's production timeline intersects with evolving global demand forecasts. The International Energy Agency projects continued oil demand through the coming decades, though growth rates may slow. Long lead offshore projects must consider potential peak demand scenarios. If global consumption plateaus sooner than expected, price volatility could intensify. Namibia must plan for revenue variability, not permanence. Geopolitically, the Orange Basin discoveries have recalibrated attention. Washington views stable energy suppliers through the lens of diversification and strategic partnership. Brussels considers Atlantic supply lines within broader decarbonization frameworks. Indo-Gulf states monitor emerging producers as both partners and competitors. China evaluates infrastructure and investment opportunities linked to long-term supply security. Southern Africa, traditionally overshadowed by West African oil producers like Nigeria and Angola, now hosts a potential new node of hydrocarbon output. South Africa's own energy challenges amplify the regional implications. Cross-border energy infrastructure, refined product trade, and service industry integration could deepen regional ties. Namibia's political stability enhances its attractiveness. Since independence, peaceful transitions and adherence to constitutional processes have differentiated it from several neighbors. Stability reduces risk premiums in investment decisions, but stability must adapt to scale. Managing multi-billion-dollar energy flows tests even established institutions. The Atlantic Ocean, long a peripheral stage in global energy geopolitics compared to the Persian Gulf, could see increased traffic and strategic calculation. Insurance rates, naval presence, shipping logistics. Each subtly adjusts when new supply centers emerge. The question lingers: will Namibia become a pivotal energy supplier, or will it remain a promising frontier whose potential is moderated by caution and constraint? Three futures stand before the country. In the first, Namibia achieves strategic breakthrough. Regulatory frameworks mature quickly. Transparent licensing processes reinforce investor confidence. A sovereign wealth fund accumulates disciplined savings insulated from short-term political pressure. EU oil revenues are invested in infrastructure, education, and economic diversification. Green hydrogen projects progress in parallel, positioning the country as a dual energy exporter. Local content policies cultivate domestic engineering and service industries. Youth employment expands through industrial clusters linked to energy infrastructure. Under this trajectory, Namibia does not merely export crude. It leverages hydrocarbons to accelerate structural transformation, reducing inequality and broadening its economic base. In the second future, outcomes are more tempered. Production proceeds, revenues increase, but diversification lags. The economy grows, yet remains heavily tied to oil cycles. Institutions manage funds competently but cautiously. Renewable ambitions advance slowly. Living standards improve incrementally. Gained though inequality narrows only modestly. Namibia becomes a respected mid-tier producer, stable but not transformative. The third scenario is less comfortable. Political competition intensifies around revenue allocation. Fiscal discipline weakens. Borrowing rises in anticipation of sustained high prices. Oil crowds out other sectors. Environmental controversies generate reputational strain. If global demand softens, fiscal stress compounds. None of these futures is predetermined. Each depends on decisions being made now, before first oil reaches export terminals. As waves break along Namibia's Atlantic coast, the horizon looks unchanged. Fishing vessels still depart at dawn. Desert winds sweep across dunes shaped over millennia. On the surface, the country remains as it was, but beneath the seabed, a different timeline is forming. Energy discoveries alter more than balance sheets. They alter psychology. They shift how nations see themselves and how others see them. Namibia stands at a threshold familiar to few countries and treacherous to many. Oil can amplify strength or magnify weakness. It can finance transformation or entrench distortion. The comparison to Qatar captures imagination because it evokes sovereign wealth, global investment portfolios, and outsized geopolitical influence. Yet Qatar's trajectory was shaped by specific historical, demographic, and geopolitical conditions unlikely to be replicated exactly. Namibia's path will be its own. The world did not expect a quiet Atlantic nation to emerge as a potential hydrocarbon heavyweight during an era defined by climate pledges and decarbonization summits. And yet here it is, negotiating contracts, drafting regulatory reforms, debating sovereign funds, balancing oil rigs with wind turbines. The shock is not that oil was discovered. The shock is that in a moment when many assumed the petroleum age was waning, a new frontier has opened. Whether that frontier becomes a foundation for generational prosperity or a cautionary tale will depend less on geology and more on governance. Oil can make a nation wealthier. Only institutions can make it rich.